All right, we are live on YouTube and we are in the house on Zoom. Awesome. So we are, as we looked at on last week, we are going to close out with this Joseph story. And so I want you all to get Genesis 50. Genesis 50. I'm going to read the entire chapter of Genesis 50. And I'm going to read it from the New Revised Standard Version. It says, "Then Joseph threw himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him." Joseph's father, Jacob, had died. So Joseph commanded the physicians in his service to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel, Jacob. They spent 40 days in doing this, for that is the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. We're going to come back to that. When the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph addressed the household of Pharaoh. "If now I have found favor with you, please speak to Pharaoh as follows. My father made me swear an oath. He said, I am about to die. In the tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now, therefore, let me go up so that I may bury my father. Then I will return." Pharaoh answered, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. Both chariots and charioteers went up with him. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they held there a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed a time of mourning for his father 7 days. When the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning on the part of the Egyptians." Therefore, the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had instructed them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, the field near Mamre, which Abraham bought as a burial site from Ephraim the Hittite. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong we did to him?" So they approached Joseph saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him and said, "We are here as your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this same way, he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were also born on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." So Joseph made the Israelites swear, saying, "When God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here." And Joseph died, being 110 years old. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading and hearing of his word. Now, let's do some work. So before I get to the main points, something jumped out. In Jewish culture today, how long do they take to bury the body? Anybody know? Okay.
Repeat that, Reverend. Repeat that.
In Jewish culture today, how long do they take to bury a body?
I think it's 3 days. I think it's 3 days.
They gotta bury him before 6 p.m., right? Before the sun go down.
Okay. So you both are real right there. So when Jesus died, it was a Friday, right?
Right.
And they hurried up to get him in the tomb, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, because Friday at 6 p.m. began the Passover.
Right.
So you couldn't do anything during Passover. So they hurried up and got him in the grave. But Emmett and Jerry Wiggins just text, yeah, 3 days, right? 3 days. Normally, so if Jesus had not died on Friday, let's say he died Monday, then in 3 days, he would be buried. Ancient ritual and custom. Let me read something again to you. I'm starting at the first verse of Genesis 50. Then Joseph threw himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded the physicians in his service to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. They spent 40 days in doing this, for that is the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 7 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Jackie in the YouTube space. Yeah, so what you're looking at is Joseph, because he is living in Egypt, he is a part of the Egyptian administration. He's somewhat a part of Pharaoh's family, even though he's Hebrew. He is living in the custom of the Egyptians, y'all. And so the Egyptians embalm people like that. It preserves them, right? So the rituals of burial and whatnot are coming straight from the Egyptians in this text. Now, remember, as I said before, these are all Black African people. They're just Black African people who have different cultures, different customs. The Egyptians circumcise boys on the first day. When they're born, they circumcise. Hebrews circumcise boys on the 8th day. Again, these are Black African people who have different customs. Hey there, Kathleen in the YouTube. So what we just read here is that Joseph instructs the Egyptians, physicians, to practice their custom of burial on his father, and, as we read at the end, on himself. Now, there is a necessity in doing that. If they were in their ancestral area, 3 days would apply. But they got to carry Jacob's body, Israel's body, back to Canaan. He ain't gonna last on a journey back from Egypt to Canaan. It's gonna take more than 3 days. And what happens to a body after, a few days, a dead body? What happens? It begins to decay, right? It begins to stink, right? So the practices of the Egyptians are convenient to make sure they can do what they need to do and get Israel's body to Canaan to bury it. And Joseph's body has to be preserved for hundreds of years. When Joseph died, they're in Egypt. They don't get out of Egypt for over 400 years, because there came a time where they lived there all this time, and then they get in bondage there. Joseph's body has got to be preserved, and Egyptians had the best way of doing this. Egyptians were masters of preserving bodies. The Egyptians were the highest culture of the world. I mean, they were the height of everything. And so the convenience of their practice is needed. What that suggests to us is that sometimes some rituals, some traditions that we are not used to are necessary, even though we're not necessarily in that tradition, in that culture, even religious culture. There's some practices that are useful. So that's just a side point to where we're going tonight. And I wanted to lift that up. Now, we get down to verse 15. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong we did to him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servant of the God of your father. Joseph wept as they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, we are here as your slave. People who do wrong never forget the wrong they did to somebody else. Now, they want you to forget. They want you to forget. But they never forget. They never forget that they did horrible things to you. They never forget that they betrayed you. They never forget that they lied on you. They never forget how they turned their back on you. They never forget how they sold you out and sold you down the river. They never forget it. Now they want you to forget, but they never forget it. They may act like they've forgotten. They may act like, they may act like that's a long time ago and, we shouldn't dwell on the past. But they never forget. Why? Because they're always watching and wondering, when is it going to be their time to be in the place where they messed over you? We see that and that's a good segue. We see that right now in the country we live in. The people who created the awful and horrible institution of chattel slavery. That's right, Kathleen, guilty. They never forget, they never have forgotten that they held our people in horrendous conditions of servitude and slavery. They never forget the brutality that was visited. And we're talking about the great grandchildren and whatnot of those who did it. But these descendants of those who created that institution, they never forget what their ancestors did and what they have benefited from, but they want us to forget. We don't need to be having textbooks that talk about slavery. Let's change the word slavery and to say these were involuntary immigrants or something like that, to nicen it up and sweeten it up. They know good and doggone well what they did. Their worry is that if descendants of African people in this nation ever get into positions of authority and power, then they are going to turn around and do exactly or worse to them what was done, what they committed. It is a truest truth as you can get. People that do evil, people that do meanness, people that do harm, they never forget. They want you to forget, but they never forget. And they're always worrying that you are going to flip the script on them if you ever get in a position where you are able to now enact laws and do all kinds of things like that. And so one of the problems that we have in this country is that there are those people who have never forgotten, and they want to remain in positions of power so that they can control what happens to them in case those that they have subjugated and taken through all kinds of hell, to prevent them from ever thinking about doing it. Now, guess what? The average Black person in America ain't thinking about, doing to them what they did to us. Now, I ain't gonna say all. There's some Black folk who say, if I ever get in a position, I'm gonna put a hurting on some white folk. But that's not the majority of Black people in America. Majority of Black people in America are not thinking about revenge. They're thinking about reparations. There's a different R word they're thinking about. They're thinking about paying the debt you owe. And so it plays out in our families. If you had a sibling that did you wrong and mistreated you and bullied you or made fun of you and stuff like that, sibling never forgot. That sibling ain't forgot it. They hope you forgot it. But they ain't never forgot it. If you had, if you were in, a bad marriage and the person that you were married to, did you wrong, they ain't never gonna forget that they did you wrong. They want you to forget. They ain't gonna never forget, because they're always wondering when is gonna be my time, when they gonna try to come back and get back at me. So you can't get around it. And those of us who have done somebody wrong, we ain't forgot it. We ain't forgot it. So the brothers, they now realize, like like I mentioned before, like in The Godfather, Michael Corleone told them, as long as my mother's alive, don't harm Fredo. Ooh, but the day after his mother's funeral, Fredo went out on the boat. He was supposed to take Michael Corleone's son fishing. They go fishing every day. He was supposed to take him fishing, and Michael said, "Hey, come in the house. My boy got to come in the house. He got something to do." And Michael Corleone sent two of his guys to go fishing with Fredo. And last thing you saw was Fredo throwing up them Hail Marys, and you heard a pop, pop. And he was gone, because Fredo had betrayed Michael. And these brothers, they realized, they don't realize that Jacob is dead. They know Jacob is dead, but now they realize that Jacob may have been the buffer to keep Joseph from doing them harm. And again, they're guilty people. So this is the paranoia that guilty people live under. And so they make up a lie. Don't tell me about, reality TV. It's right here in the Bible. They make up a lie. It's bad enough that they did the boy wrong over but probably 40 years ago, earlier now. It's probably about 30, 40 years now. It's bad enough they did him wrong, and that now they make up a lie to try to save their skins, thinking that all this time he's just waiting on an opportunity for the dad to die so they can do him some harm. So they make up a lie. They say, your daddy, notice how they put it. Your daddy, said, for you to forgive us. So according to your daddy's word, they keep throwing that at him. According to your daddy's word, you don't hurt us. We'll be your slaves or whatever. And Joseph just cries, because, it hurts that after all these years that they don't realize that, he is not the person that they first met when they got to Egypt. He's not. When they got to Egypt, Joseph was hot, and Joseph was really putting them through the ringer, and he was scaring them half to death, because he had the power to do it, and he was making them feel every bit of the fear, at least as close to the fear that he had felt. But they don't realize, after all these years and all he has done, all the way they live, they are living a life of luxury in Egypt because of Jacob. Because of Joseph. And so he weeps to think that they still are holding on to their guilt. And so he said those famous words. He said, "I ain't God." He's saying, God had some other plans for your mischief. And so he says, "I'm not God. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God used what you did for good." And so those are the iconic words that just bring, people to their feet, during service. It brings some tears of joy in the eyes persons who read it because they've been hurt and mishandled and misjudged. And these words are very powerful words because they point out that God is a God who even when other folk are doing us wrong, God is still orchestrating in the background for something better to come out of it. And so I want to lift up some points that I draw from all that we have studied, all that we have looked at in this Joseph story. And again, the story is just full of insights beyond, just the you meant it for evil, God meant it for good. It is the story of a person who goes through some almost unimaginable the word discomfort isn't even strong enough. Almost unimaginable hurt and pain and disappointment and maybe even depression. I mean, for years, this is not something that Joseph experienced, in what we call these short seasons of maybe a few months or maybe even a year. This went on, oh my God, for, close to 20 years of his life, from 17, until he was 30 years old when he entered into the service, second in command for Pharaoh. It was an arduous and painful journey for Joseph. So this story lifts up and helps us navigate through, in big part through his eyes. It's really the narrator of Genesis, is narrating this, but to kind of feel some of these aches and whatnot, because guess what? Somebody that is watching this video, this broadcast right now, or somebody that has had an arduous journey in their life that didn't last just a few months or a few days or a few weeks or even a year or two. Somebody or somebody here been going through some disappointment, and here it is. That is not of your own doing. Stuff just happened to you. People just used you. People just manipulated you. People just mischaracterized you and did it, for no other reason other than that there is something in you that intimidated them, because God gave you something. God gave you a dream. God gave you some insight. God gave you a vision. God gave you some confidence that you were more. You were created more for where you were. God just did something with you that made you look higher in your life than others around you, and because of that, some around you, could be in your family, could be in your associations, growing and matriculating through grammar school and high school and even college for those who went to college, or matriculating through employment on different jobs or the same job for a lengthy period of time. It may have been that. This story helps illustrate that in a way that, there's something about the word commiserate. The word commiserate means that I am empathetic with what you are going through, because I have been dealing with or dealt with or are dealing with right now similar circumstances. And so this story is a way to commiserate with a biblical character who is no better than you and I. His life just illustrates some of the stuff that some of us have gone through for an extended period of time. It illustrates that, and it illustrates God's presence, okay? So the first point that when we think about Joseph's words, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. First point I lift up is observation. I'll call it an observation. It tells me you may be hurt by heartless people, but God will hold you and help you handle that hurt. Joseph was hurt by his brothers. I mean, the hurt was a physical pain, and it was a more emotional and psychological trauma. To first of all, be hated on by siblings simply because of something his daddy did. Joseph, as I've said before, had no control over his daddy favoring him over his brothers. Maybe he should have kept his mouth shut about his dreams. I hear a lot of people saying that, well, you know, he was kind of a braggart and all that. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. You know, you want to share your dreams with the people that are closest to you. And maybe at a young age, at 16, 17 years old, you know, maybe he was a little teasing about it. But the fact of the matter is that they hated him even before that, because his daddy didn't like him. And when he shared his dream, they hated him all the more. That's a hurt, y'all. This blood family. You all have to navigate your home together. I've known blood family siblings who fought like cats and dogs. But I tell you what, if you mess with one of them, all of a sudden they got unity. And they all of a sudden, oh no, you ain't gonna talk to us like that. Oh, that's my brother, that's my sister. And they take care of business. And after they take care of business, then they go back to fighting and fussing and all that type of stuff. I don't know about you. I've known families like that. It's fascinating. Fight like cats and dogs, argue with one another, beat up one another, do all kind of mean stuff to one another. But you let one of them come home and says, so-and-so at school hit me or did something to me, the whole clan is coming after you. It's crazy. That's crazy. So I don't know if Joseph's siblings were like that or not. But what it showed, the observation is, you may be hurt by heartless people, but God will hold you and help you handle that hurt. And I know there are some testimonies of folk who have been hurt by other folk. You know, there's a saying, no good deed goes unpunished. And hurt people. We know all those phrases, and they are true. And many of us, you know, have been hurt, you know, for trying to do good, or trying to help somebody, trying to be a help to someone, trying to be a decent person. You've been hurt. And what the text in this observation says, you may have been hurt, but God has a way of holding you. And that's important, of holding you and helping you handle that hurt in a way that holds you together. Another point is, you may be deceived and dealt a bad hand, but God directs deliverance even through your difficulties. Joseph was lied on by Mrs. Potiphar, and he had the trust of Mr. Potiphar, and we talked about this. Mr. Potiphar had to know his wife, you know, flirted with other folk. He had to know that. I mean, this couldn't have been the first time, right? But for whatever reason, you know, he then throws Joseph into prison without even a discussion about it. And then while in prison, Joseph helps the cupbearer, and the cupbearer forgets about him. That's a deception. It's dealt a bad hand. Sometimes we are dealt a bad hand in life, you know. Anybody play cards, you know, I play some bid whist. I don't mind whipping a few butts on the bid whist table. I can do spades too. I don't do spades too much because I graduated to bid whist, but I can do a little whooping in some spades too. I don't mind, you know. But every now and then you get dealt a bad hand. And if you know anything about bid whist, there are times where you or your partner are dealing. And sometimes my partner dealt me a bad hand. Not intentionally, of course, they deal in the cards, but sometimes it's somebody that's supposed to be your partner that deals you a bad hand. Now that just came to me. You're gonna hear that preached. My goodness. And what do you do when you dealt a bad hand? Well, that same partner that dealt the bad hand also probably got a better hand than yours. And so the way you do in cards, you just keep playing that hand. And God, that's playing that hand that you dealt, knowing that God is the director of the hand you've been dealt. That God knows how to turn a bad hand into a winning hand. Oh my God, these things, this is getting real good. And so even through the difficulties, God has a way of directing your deliverance through your difficulties. God, I told you, God has a way of weaving threads of hope through the fabric of frustration. God has a way of doing that, y'all. And so there's another observation that the text shows me, and that is this. There are times you will have to face the folks who frustrated you, who forsook you, and who forgot about you. But remember, it was God's faithfulness to you that enabled you to get through it, that fortified you, and God did it so that others can flourish because of you. Kathleen says, play the hand you are dealt. God is in control. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's real good. That's real good. Exactly right. So remember this last point in this section. You will have to face sometime the folk who frustrated you, who forsook you, who forgot about you. But remember, it was God's faithfulness to you that kept you so that others can flourish because of you. Remember what Joseph said. Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Remember what the turning point of the story was. Joseph had to face his brothers. Famine caused everybody to be in need. And Joseph had to face the very ones who had done him wrong. And so it was important for him to face them because in facing them, he had to release the bitterness. He had to release the resentment. He had to release the regret in order to be able to forgive them so that his people could flourish. Now, we talked about this, that the forgiveness was not forgetting what they had done. He remembered what they had done. So this thing about forgive and forget is not biblical. Oh yeah, you're supposed to remember what the person did, but you release the bitterness, release the regret, release the resentment so that you can flourish and others can flourish through you. Because as long as our hearts harbor bitterness, harbor regret, harbor resentment over either an actual wrong done to us or a perceived wrong, because sometimes we get in our minds that somebody did us wrong and they really didn't do us wrong. We just think they did, okay? Because we don't talk to them, we don't face them. We try to what? Ignore them. We try to ignore them and think that we can move on without facing what needs to be fixed. It ain't gonna get fixed until you face it. So there are repressed things in many of us, if not in all of us, that have never been dealt with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you got to go to the person. It means that you got to deal with it, you and God, to release the bitterness, release the regrets, release the resentment so that you can then forgive. In other words, the forgiveness is freeing you up so that not only you can flourish, but God wants to flourish, wants others to flourish because of you. So your ability to surmount and overcome the trials, the trauma, the difficulty is not just for you. It is for you to be a vehicle for others to flourish because of you. Okay? And so the key for Joseph in this was that he had to come to grips with it. And remember, his turning point was when he was about to do harm. He was about to do harm to his daddy and his little brother, Benjamin. And he loved them more than he loved his other brothers because the other brothers did him wrong, right? And it was when Judah put his life on the line for his little brother and their daddy. And when Joseph saw that Judah at this point was willing to die so that Benjamin and his daddy would be spared the grief, is when Joseph broke down because he realized, okay, I can't do this. You can't harbor that type of, you can't harbor that type of anger and bitterness and regret and resentment. Again, never forget what wrong was done to you. Never forget, ever. And church folk that say that, it's not in the scripture. But what you do see in the scripture is that the people never forgot. Now it says God throws our stuff in the sea of forgetfulness. In other words, what it's saying is God don't forget what you did. God knows exactly what you did. God reminds you of what you did, but God also reminds you, you did this, but this is what I did because I loved you. In other words, God is saying, I'm not holding bitterness. I'm not holding regret, resentment against you, which I could. And so this was the turning point of the story so that what Joseph, what his role was could be fulfilled. So let me throw out these observations and then we can have some discussion on it. Another observation is this. Your life has spiritual purpose. This is what Joseph's story teaches us. Joseph was given the dream because his life has spiritual purpose. Everybody has a spiritual purpose. You are here with a spiritual purpose. You are not here to get up in the morning, go to work for somebody else, come home, pick some dinner. If you got children, make sure the children are doing their homework, yada, yada, yada. Watch TV, go to sleep. Get up the next morning, go to work. Do the same thing over and over again, that cycle. You're not meant for that. That's part of the process of paying bills and all of that. That's not what you're created for. You're created for something much greater than that. So everybody has spiritual purpose. The important thing is to discern what your spiritual purpose is. Another way to frame it is, what is it that you dreamed? What did you dream about yourself when you were growing up? What visions did you see of yourself when you're growing up? What ideas of purpose and position, what did you see for yourself? Now, for many of us, unfortunately, our experiences in life make us forget, make us so, life beats it out of us, right? And some of us right now can't remember that. And one of the challenges, one of the practices for after this is to begin to be still on a consistent basis with God, to recover what God created you for. All of us have a spiritual purpose. The other observation is your decisions determine what you truly believe. Okay? Your decisions determine what you truly believe. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter that you say, I'm saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost. It don't matter what you say. It doesn't matter that you say, I love the Lord. I'm a servant of God. I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer in Jesus. It doesn't matter what you say. Your decisions determine what you truly believe. Your decisions in the moment determine what you truly believe. I'm going to say it again. Every decision you make determines what you truly believe. Because the decisions become the actions. The decisions become the actions, and the actions determine, they betray, they reveal what we really believe. Okay? So Joseph had the decisions to make. When he was sold into slavery, he had some decisions to make. Was he going to be a person of integrity? And was he going to do like he always did, was whatever is in my responsibility, I'm going to do it well. He had a decision to make. Now, it's a hard decision because he's in slavery and he doesn't want to be there. And his decision could have been, you know what? I'm just going to be a scoundrel. I ain't supposed to be here and blah, blah, blah. And he might end up dead, probably. Okay. So his decision in Potiphar's house, his decision to not go after Mrs. Potiphar, I mean, all those determine, what did he say? I can't go against God to be with you, woman. And so his decision in the prison had a decision to make. How am I going to operate here? Joseph, he showed that he had a characteristic, a personality trait, that he liked to be a help to people. That as far as it depended on him, he wanted to be a help to people. And so in the prison, he decided to be that help. And so he gained the trust of the prison warden. And he gave him leeway. Your decisions determine what you truly believe. Now, next observation. Your willingness to surrender your wants to God's will allows you to access God's sufficiency. Your willingness to surrender your wants to God's will allows you to access God's sufficiency. God's sufficiency. We talked about that. The Lord, Paul said, the Lord told him, my grace is sufficient. In other words, you have enough of what you need to deal with what you are facing. And for Joseph to experience what we call the favor or the grace of God in those situations was his submitting to God's will. In particular, it is seen in what I just said a few minutes ago, when he comes to grips with, I can't hold this bitterness against my brothers. Okay, I got to release it. That his submission of his want. His want was, I want to get him back. I want him to feel what I feel. I want him to go through the pain I went through. But he submitted his wants to God's will and God's sufficiency. Finally, your persistence and perseverance to God's purposes for your life will pass on God's divine promises to those coming after you. So we think of Reverend Emmett is on, and others who, who are financial gurus, we think of passing on financial inheritance. And that's important. That's important. That is important. That's not most important. The most thing that's important is what you're passing on that will create better human beings. What is most important, because you can pass on wealth to stupid people, right? To people who have not, who don't know how to be good human beings. You see, you can pass on a whole bunch of wealth. We see that. We see that. Jeff Bezos, what's that boy, Tesla owner, and I ain't gonna mention 45's name. All these folk inherited or gained great wealth for whatever means, and they got it. They got this great wealth, and they're stupid people. They're just ignorant, idiotic people who have no soul in them whatsoever. So passing on wealth is good, and we need to do our best to do that. But passing on character and integrity is better. Now, it doesn't mean one over the other. It means you want to do both. But if you're going to do anything, pass on a legacy that can be seen in the footprints of your life, so that, Elon Musk is that idiot's name, so that when folks speak your name, nobody has to list your characteristic, other folk will share it. In other words, when folk mention you, they need to be able to mention that was a praying so-and-so. Or they need to mention, you know what, that was the most loving person I ever seen in life. I'm not talking about your spouse and your children. They're gonna lie about you anyway. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, they're gonna paint nice pictures of you, because nobody, wants to say, that they're close loved one. But I'm talking about people that you have met throughout life. You leave an imprint. And regardless of what you say about you, your imprint will say more. And so what you want to pass on is the promise of God in you that is revealed in your interactions with folk. Joseph passed on the divine promise from God. Let me read the scripture in case y'all forgot. First of all, let's start with Genesis 50. Verse 25. Well, I'm going to start at 24. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So Joseph made the Israelites swear, saying, when God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here. And Joseph died. Being 110 years old, he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Now, do me a favor. Go to Exodus. Exodus, the 13th chapter. I'm going to read the 19th verse. And it reads, well, I'm going to start at the 18th. It says, so God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of the land of Egypt, prepared for battle. And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had required a solemn oath of the Israelites, saying, God will surely take notice of you, and then you must carry my bones with you from here. Now, go with me to Joshua, the 24th chapter, the 32nd verse. It reads, the bones of Joseph which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried in Shechem, in the portion of ground that Jacob had bought from the children of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. It became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. This is over 400 years later. They've been carrying around Joseph's bones because of a promise that he passed on from God, because he lived the promise of God. They didn't know when they were going to leave Egypt, when Joseph was alive. They didn't know that a Pharaoh would arrive that didn't know Joseph and would put them in horrendous slavery and kill boy babies. They didn't know that it would be over 400 years. They didn't know that they would be led through the Red Sea or any of that, but they held on to Joseph's bones because of a promise. They held on to the promise of God that God had made to Abraham because of Joseph. If they didn't have the promise, there would be no people. Your life helps the promise continue in the next generation. God has made a promise, and your life is a vehicle to pass on the promise of God to the next generation. We don't know how long. Let me close this with this. When I first heard Jeremiah Wright preach, I was a member of Chatham Bethlehem Presbyterian Church. My family, wife and children, we remember Chatham Bethlehem Presbyterian Church. That's my mama's church. I was an ordained elder in the church. Started here in Dr. Wright. Now, before that, I had been following, I had been going to the churches that my parents went to. And so when I heard Jeremiah Wright preach, I had to go see him. So I started going. Janice went with me once or twice. There was a morning. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't say anything to anybody. It was a morning that I knew. Now, I need to tell you that my parents both went to separate churches. I had lived that all my life. And so I knew it was okay for a husband and wife to go to separate churches if that was their choice. So I wasn't trying to influence my family, but I knew the morning that I got up that particular morning that I was going to join Trinity under Jeremiah Wright. I went that morning and I walked the aisle. When I walked the aisle, I heard in my spirit these words: "Now my bones can rest." Those were the bones of my grandparents and my great-grandparents. The stories of I'm named after my grandfather, my mama's father, John. He was John Divine Favors. Mama named me John. And so their life stories were a part of my very fabric. And when I joined Trinity, the voice said, "The bones of your ancestors can rest here." And yeah, it came from this Genesis 50. The promise was being passed on. Okay. So your life. And that's what Reverend Kim said. She said, "Me too. When me and my mother joined Trinity, we said, Mother dear is proud. That is my mother's mother. But my God, what a God, what a mighty God." So yeah, these are the observations hope you were able to take some down to mull over them. The Joseph story shows us so much, y'all. So, I mean, we can open it up for some discussion. Anybody in YouTube got some chat, or in the Zoom space? Anybody got some feedback? Y'all good? Y'all all right?
Great word, Pastor. I've heard your story many, many times, and tell you the truth, it didn't do nothing for me. But I'm telling you, I've been blown away. And matter of fact, it got me a little emotional. It got me a little emotional here. Because I think of, my family has been great, but I know that I am different than anybody in my family. And but part of that is the fact that God spoke to me, but a lot of it also has to do with the fact that my mother was praying for me, even though she might not have been doing what she needed to do. And my family has always, I'm usually the last one to find out stuff. I'm the last one. But I know that you got to have a forgiving heart. And so I really have identified with your teaching and of course your sermons that you preached from Joseph, because through I just never looked at it. I just never looked at it like this. I mean, this. So I thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. God gets the glory. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. Really appreciate that. Any other feedback? Again, y'all on YouTube, I know y'all can type something in anybody in Zoom room.
I got feedback. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And I just kind of wrote down one thing that you said, because it kind of seemed that I'm starting to see this manifest in my life. And that was you. I think I got the quote right. Your willingness to submit your wants to God's will allows you to access God's sufficiency. I think that's true. I mean, as I find that the more that I do that, the better things are for me. The easier the road is. It's easier. I mean, the road is rough at times, but I have that direction that I didn't have in the past.
Thank you. My God, thank you for that. Isla says, Joseph is the very definition of forgiveness, but he let God use him mightily. He's worthy to be emulated. My. Good word.
Reverend Jackson, you it's like throughout this whole time you've been talking about the story of Joseph, and you, like Reverend Emmett said, you brought so much that it's like I got to go back and unpack all that, because I see all these lessons that I'm learning of every day, every Tuesday that you said something. And then I said, okay, you said 5 things that I got to learn, glean from. And so it's by you being such a great teacher, it's hard to get through all of the tips, that you have taught. So it's like, so that's why I'm not saying anything, I got to go back to A and then to B and then go, and then say, okay, I've learned this, and I'm going in my life, and I see it reflection, and I'm going to do this, this, and this as a result of it, or, you know, with the will of help of God. So
Yeah.
I just let you know, it's so much,
Yeah.
it's so much, but thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for being, again, thank you for the vulnerability, you know, and I will admit, that the work, in this Joseph thing came because God was moving me to deal with some unforgiveness for some things, and helping me deal with the promise that that there's a purpose that I have that gets blocked because of bitterness, resentment, regrets. And so this part of, you know, the work was not projection, it was personal. So that
Wow.
you both, you know, so that, you know.
Oh, you spoke from what you know.
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
That's why it comes through like it does.
Yeah. And that's how the insight comes through.
Yeah, it wasn't a theory.
Right. So yeah, we and there's so much more. You know, we only, if I'm honest, we only dealt with the tip of the iceberg, because there's so much more below. And we'll get back to it at another time. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think. Was there any lesson, you know, from a book that you gleaned about the life of Joseph? Because it is, I told you before, I've just been wanting to study him for a while because, you know, of my life. But so I'm sure somebody, one of us, whatever, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to that. And I pray that that you get to it, that I get to it or whatever, because this is such a beautiful, beautiful story. It's even beyond forgiveness. It's I don't know, it's very healing and very, his story can be very healing and very therapeutic, you know, for me. I'm speaking for me.
Yeah.
You know, something superficial. I had to bring I'm good for bringing in superficial. But when I was a kid, you know, my mother, we got kicked out of the Baptist church because she didn't have $50 for the pastor's anniversary.
Oh my goodness.
We had to walk like was it the 3 blocks west, and we joined the nearest church, which was a Lutheran church. So I mean, I was confirmed. I was about 10, I think, 9 or 10, maybe 11, and I was confirmed as a Lutheran. And it was a German Lutheran church. It was a kind of a huge church, but you know how neighborhoods changed. It was a huge church in the ghetto, and I was an acolyte, and we had mass every Sunday, real wine. And in the acolyte training, when I got confirmed, well, in the acolyte training, they said something, and I thought that was, man, that's creepy. The father of blacks told us, and said, hey, there were bones inside of the altar in that church. And I was like, huh? What? Like, are you serious? So yeah, there were bones of, I guess, of the saints, or I don't know whose bones, but he said there were bones in this altar, and it was a pretty big altar. I was like, yeah, right. But now it comes full circle from what you're saying, that hey, and then the reverence, and I guess when we think about Native Americans, the reverence that they have for like, okay, some of the mountains or some pieces of land because of the bones of the ancestors being in there, and for Joseph to say, when y'all go, y'all take me with you. That's like, wow. I mean, that to me, that's deep. The reverence, you know.
Let me, here's just another, real quick side point, because I tell you, there's just so much in here. I told you, Joseph is living dual customs here. these living customs of the Egyptians.
Because he was embalmed, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you know, he is practicing some of Egyptian customs along with his Hebrew custom. So, but here's something that Africans do. Before the brother by the name of Patrice Malidoma Patrice Sommet.
Okay, that book, that weird book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, weird book.
I'm sorry.
I
I
mean,
got that
of
book.
what his stories in his book of Water and the Spirit, and he talks about, you know, well, he talks about growing up in his he was of the Dagara people in Burkina Faso, Africa, and missionaries stole him when he was young, stole him from his family. And then he spent, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years or whatever, being raised by them, and he escaped when he was a teenager. Well, he was, you know, a late teen. He escaped and went back to his village. And the thing he wanted to do was go through the manhood training. And they told him, you're too old. It might kill you. And so he goes, but he insists, and they let him go through the manhood training. And it just blows your mind. That's why, you know, off the subject, you know, I like movies. I like the series like Game of Thrones and, you know, those series, you know, that show us some European, you know, fable and fairy tale and mythology and all of that. I like that stuff. You know, I like it. But while I'm watching it, I always say to myself, Africa has such rich stories to tell that would blow the minds of everybody, you know, that many are not fables and fairy tales or myth. These are, you know, happening. So when Malidoma tells about going through that manhood training, he sees some stuff that will blow your mind. It was part of the ritual. Because of how Africans see life. And I was sharing earlier with Dr. Buhuro that Africans always see there are three categories of persons with us at all times. There's the category of people that we see with the naked eye. The second category are those that are waiting to be born. The third category are those who have passed on and slipped beyond the veil of time. They traffic in eternity. They are always with us, okay? And part of that in the movie Soul Food and the series, when grandmama died, the little boy was being visited by grandmama, you remember? And so she would help him get his courage up and things like that because she had passed on and she was with him, because that's the way Africans see that there are those three categories of persons with us. So, but the thing about Malidoma, he talked about in another book, he talked about whenever somebody died in his village, in his tribe, they would weep, literally weep tears for 7 days. And the reason they weep the tears for 7 days for them is because they believe their tears added to the water that was needed to carry that person to the other side. So the weeping and mourning, men and women crying, was extremely essential for the process of healing. It says in verse 4 of Genesis 50, it's verse 3, the physicians embalmed Jacob. They spent 40 days in doing this, for that is the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. They wept for him 70 days.
Yeah.
I hear people at funerals now. You hear people all the time. I tried not to cry. I didn't know we're gonna cry. And most of the time when I do a funeral, I start out with, please don't hold your tears back.
Right.
Tears are a way of honoring the person that you love. People don't cry for people that they didn't love. Okay.
Mm.
So if you didn't love them, you have no business at the funeral in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you showed up, then you're saying that this person meant something to me. Therefore, you ought to be shedding tears. And especially with men, I got to hold it together because somebody got to hold it together. No,
Right.
no. That's European. And we could ever stop, if we could ever just realize that too much Europe is in our mind. That's European.
Yeah.
You haven't lost control because you cry and you weep. God put tear ducts in your eyes for a reason. So it's all through the scriptures. It's all through our culture and our history. You have to pay homage to that person. Now it's a production. We got to get it. We got to hurry up. We got to hurry up and get the funeral directors and the funeral home here, and we got to get them ready, and we got to have the funeral within a week. Got to have it in a week, no more than 2 weeks. If we wait 3 weeks, that's too long because people, all that. We have bought into a wrong way of down south when our parents, when that particular grandparents, great grandparents, funeral homes were kind of scarce, but the bodies stayed in the house.
Yeah.
When that person died, that body was in the house for a couple of days.
Yeah.
It allowed the proper cleansing of grieving. Because you gotta, when you wake up in the morning, that casket is right there. And we don't know how many people got up in the middle of the night and went to that casket that was in the house. It was a pine box then, and went to that pine box and started talking to brother, sister, mama, daddy, grandmama, granddaddy. Now they talking to the remains because the spirit, we believe, abided, but they would get up in the middle of the night because they couldn't sleep. I wish I had said, I'm sorry about this. But it allowed the full gamut of grieving to take place. And we don't have time for it now. Everything is production in some ways. I don't mean to diminish all our funeral processing, but what I'm saying is that we hijack the grieving process that our African culture recognized important. Now in Europe, it's such a cold climate that they burn the body. You can't break through the ground to bury nobody through the ice and whatnot when it gets cold, and it gets real cold up there. So, you see in the movies, you see, in Game of Thrones or whatever it is, you'll see them put them on a pyre and burn them. Because, you have the bodies spreading disease. And so you do that quick, right? You can't have the body laying around. And so that creates a psyche in the mind about how we do things, right? So therefore, let's hurry up, get them burnt, get them moved on so we can move on, right? That's not the way Africans saw that, right?
Yeah.
It's not the way Africans saw it. So yeah.
Reverend, I would like to express this. My father died, and I had been taking care of him. As a matter of fact, I stayed up 72 hours, three days in a row without sleep before he passed away. And my brother preached a sermon, and he preached a sermon, and it's very emotional even to this day. But he preached a sermon, and my family had not forgiven my daddy.
Oh, wow.
And it's a total of 14 of us. 14. 10 of us, of course, live together. Then my other four siblings live with their mother. But I couldn't understand. I said, why aren't they helping me? Why aren't they helping me with him? And finally he passed out there in Maryville, and and I said, wow. And my brother preached, and he said, I had to preach this sermon like this. He said, I didn't know. And he told a story because my father left us in 1960, right after my, I guess my sister, my sister had just been born. And we didn't see my father for 9 years.
Wow.
And we saw him. You remember the old Riverview?
Yeah.
And my older sister, because my mother said, we're gonna catch the bus. And at that time, we had to catch the bus from East Chicago to Gary, and then the bus from Gary to 22nd and Cermak, and then catch the bus over to Western, and then Western up to Belmont. And
That's a long way to go.
yeah, because she was
Pack a
gonna
lunch.
yeah, she was gonna graduate a month later. That was
Mhm.
first of May, and they come running to my mother, and my mother said, "Girls, what's wrong with you all? We saw Daddy. We saw Daddy." She said, "Girl, all these thousands of people out here, and and here they come." Here they come, and my father and Miss Liz with because at that time three of the kids were born, and they were pregnant, and she was pregnant with the fourth one, and but my brother preached, and he preached the sermon, and it was just so weird, almost, but it was like he said, "I forgive." So all of these years, it was like a pivotal moment in our family, because a few days before, I had to call everybody in the living room to have prayer, because my mother didn't want my brother's mother name in the obituary. And she told me, she said, "I'm still the wife," which we did not know that my mother was still married to my father.
Oh wow. Wow.
And now we say thank God, because if she gets his Social Security, okay. But my brother was just the sermon really was about telling the story, and he said my father gave my sister $20. Here you ain't seen us in 9 years, and give her $20 for some feminine stuff, okay.
Wow.
And that day, my father's only cousin did something, and she was really kind of did something mean to my brother's mother, and my mother said, we don't do that. Now my mother never said anything nasty about my father, never. But she didn't allow him to ever, even forever, until he passed away, to ever chastise us or anything of that. And they were never ever, of course, relational anymore. Right. But that night, she said, "I'm sorry," and I said, "Mama," I said, you've been holding this against Daddy for all these years." So from 1960 all the way until he passed away in 2007, I said, "Mama, Jesus said, how many times you forgive?" He said, say your prayers in a sense have gone unanswered because you ain't forgave. Not until that night. Not until that night. And so this Joseph's story really just brought up a whole lot how our family was, because when I as I say, I had my confrontation with Jesus the second Sunday in January 1980. I said, I knew this Jesus, but I didn't know him as having a relationship with my personal savior. So it's like, so this story was very powerful because when I accept Jesus, my family, I joke and tell the story. I said I would go to my mother's house and they would pull the curtains down, the shades down, and I'm knocking on the door and say, "Hey, I know y'all in there," but they didn't. They knew I was gonna come in there and talk about them. And then Jesus, I had to have. I was coming home one night late, and Jesus said, "Carl, no, this is how you do it. Don't go in there talking about people. Y'all going to hell." And I witnessed, and one after the other, till every one of my siblings and my father, because when my father said he accepted Christ, I forgot about the past. I didn't hold no past against him, And so this, I'm sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking, but this Joseph hit me, because here we all 14 of us, and Mama and Daddy and Miss Liz, and it's like, wow, a lot of that, because like I said, boy, they couldn't stand me. They couldn't stand me at first. But I witnessed to my brother, he came, then I witnessed to my second older sister, then I kept witnessing, and I changed my way of how I went after them. I didn't talk unless they say they wanted my opinion. And I got my mother, and then everybody just started coming in. So I thank you. It's been this has been awesome.
Well, good. And man, and thank you for that moment of vulnerability, man. That's important. And wow, you have just, and everybody, y'all, you just touched us. So I think we're gonna end right there. So
all
I
right.
really appreciate you all, and we'll gather together next Tuesday at 6. I'll let you know then what we're gonna look at. Well, have a good night.
All right.
Have a good night, y'all. Thank you.
This was a good